The banquet hall glittered with golden light, filled with music, laughter, and wine that flowed like rivers. It was a celebration unlike any other. 180 days of royal splendor, flaunting the riches of King Xerxes of Persia. And yet, in the background of the most extravagant party in ancient history, a decision was made that would ripple through generations. A queen was removed, and a crown would soon rest on the head of an orphan Jewish girl named Esther. No one knew her name yet. No one could have guessed that she would one day risk her life to stop a genocide. But God knew. Esther's story doesn't begin with royalty. It begins in exile. She was a young Jewish girl raised in Susa, a city far from Jerusalem, far from the temple, far from home. Her people had been scattered, taken captive by Babylon decades earlier. When Babylon fell, Persia rose, and with it, a new king. Xerxes, ruler of 127 provinces from India to Ethiopia. Esther was raised by her cousin Mordecai, a devout Jew who had taken her in after the death of her parents. Mordecai taught her faith, wisdom, and courage, seeds that would one day blossom in a palace. Then came the royal search. Queen Vashti had refused the king's command to display herself before his drunken guests, and her defiance led to her removal. The empire buzzed with the news, and soon an edict was issued. Gather the most beautiful young women in the land for the king to choose a new queen. Esther was taken. Imagine the fear. A young woman, ripped from her home, placed among strangers in the harem of the most powerful man in the world. But she found favor. The Bible says, Esther pleased him and won his favor, and he quickly provided her with her beauty treatments and special food. Esther 2-9. But her identity remained a secret. Mordecai had warned her, "Tell no one you are a Jew." When her turn came to meet the king, Esther asked for nothing but what was advised. She didn't rely on extravagance. And Xerxes, surrounded by luxury, was captivated by something else, something deeper. Now the king was attracted to Esther more than to any of the other women, and she won his favor and approval more than any of the other virgins. So he set the royal crown on her head. Esther 2:17. An orphaned exile became queen of the greatest empire on earth. But the story doesn't slow down, it accelerates. Mordecai, who lingered near the palace gate, uncovered a plot to assassinate Xerxes. He passed the word to Esther, who informed the king in Mordecai's name. The conspirators were executed, but Mordecai's loyalty went unrewarded for the time being. Then entered the villain, Haman, a descendant of Agag, king of the Amalekites, ancient enemies of Israel. Haman rose to power in Xerxes' court. The king elevated him above all officials, commanding all royal servants to bow in his presence. But Mordecai refused. He would not bend the knee to a man who stood for pride and hatred, and Haman noticed. When Haman saw that Mordecai would not kneel down or pay him honor, he was enraged. Esther 3-5. But Haman's wrath wasn't satisfied with one man's blood. He sought the annihilation of Mordecai's entire people. He cast the lot, the pur, to choose a day. Then he presented his plan to the king under the guise of loyalty. There is a certain people whose customs are different. It is not in the king's best interest to tolerate them. Esther 3-8. Xerxes, unaware of Esther's heritage, gave Haman his signet ring. The decree was sealed. On the 13th day of the 12th month, all Jews, young and old, women and children, were to be killed and their goods plundered. Despair spread like fire, wailing filled the streets, and Mordecai tore his clothes, covered himself in ashes, and cried out at the king's gate. Esther, secluded in the palace, heard of his mourning. She sent clothes. He refused. She sent messengers. He replied with a plea and a warning. Esther hesitated. Approaching the king uninvited meant death, unless he extended his golden scepter. It had been 30 days since she'd seen him. But Mordecai's words cut to the heart. Do not think that because you are in the king's house you alone of all the Jews will escape, and who knows but that you have come to your royal position for such a time as this. Esther 4:13-14. And so she answered, Go, gather all the Jews, fast for me. I will go to the king, even though it is against the law. And if I perish, I perish. Esther 4:16. 3 days of silence, 3 days of prayer, 3 days of waiting. Then, dressed in royal robes, Esther entered the throne room. The king saw her. He extended the scepter. What is it, Queen Esther? What is your request? Even up to half the kingdom, it will be given you. But she didn't reveal her hand just yet. Instead, she invited the king and Haman to a banquet. At the banquet, she asked them to return the next day for another. That night, Haman went home in high spirits, only to be enraged again by the sight of Mordecai. He built a gallows, 75 feet high, to execute him. But that very night, the king couldn't sleep. He ordered the royal chronicles to be read aloud, and heard again the record of Mordecai saving his life. What honor and recognition has Mordecai received for this? He asked. Nothing, they replied. Just then, Haman entered, ready to request Mordecai's death. But before he could speak, Xerxes asked, What should be done for the man the king delights to honor? Haman, thinking it was himself, gave an extravagant answer: royal robes, a horse, a crown, the works. Go at once, the king said, and do so for Mordecai. Humiliated, Haman led the man he hated through the city, shouting his praise. The next day came the second banquet. The king asked again, What is your petition, Queen Esther? She answered, If I have found favor with you, grant me my life and the lives of my people. For we have been sold to be destroyed, killed, and annihilated. The king was stunned. Who is he? Where is the man who has dared to do such a thing? Esther pointed, This wicked Haman. Haman paled. The king, enraged, stepped out to the garden. When he returned, Haman was pleading at Esther's couch, and the king saw it as an assault. He ordered Haman hanged on the very gallows he had built for Mordecai. Mordecai was promoted. Esther pleaded again, and though the king's decree could not be revoked, a new edict was issued. The Jews could defend themselves. When the day came, they did, and they prevailed. The day meant for their destruction became the day of their deliverance. And so, the festival of Purim was born, named for the lot Haman cast to seal their doom, transformed by God into celebration. The book of Esther is unique. God's name is never mentioned. No direct miracles are recorded. And yet, his fingerprints are everywhere. In Esther's rise, in Mordecai's courage, in sleepless nights and timely feasts, in reversals of fate, and in the hidden thread of providence. Esther's story is not just history, it's a mirror, a reminder that even in silence, God is present. Even in exile, he has a plan. And perhaps, just perhaps, you too were born for such a time as this. Even today, her story is remembered every year during the Feast of Purim as a testimony of survival and deliverance. It reminds us that even when God feels silent, he is never absent. That in the most unlikely places, through the most unlikely people, history can turn. And sometimes salvation comes, wearing a crown.